Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Gurudev, Gurudev. Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo. I offer my humble obeisances to all the Vaishnavas here. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you to Yugal Kishore Prabhu and Shankar Prabhu for asking me to come. I just one, even though I have no qualifications to be here, I'm going to do my best today. I had only 1 hour to prepare this presentation, so if there are any mistakes, please forgive me and please let me know as and when you can. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. I'm just hiding this. It's already shared. Okay. Press it. Press it. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudiraye nashta prayeshva bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevayam Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtakim ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन् Tasmacha vigurvanand Bhagavad Virya Chodidhat Shabdamatram Abhut Tasman Nabah Strotam Tu Shabdagam.
You can continue.
Hmm?
You can continue.
It's late. Okay. So Tasmat from egoism and ignorance, and Vikurvanat undergoing transformation, Bhagavad Virya by the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Choditat impelled, Shabda Matram, the subtle element sound, Abhut was manifested, Tasmat from that, Nabaha, ether, Stotram, the sense of hearing, to then Shabdagam, which catches sound. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. When egoism in ignorance is agitated by the sex energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the subtle element sound is manifested, and from sound comes the ethereal sky and the sense of hearing. Purport. The beauty of the pleasant sounds heard in the area, sorry about that, it appears that from this verse, all the objects of our sense gratification are the products of egoism in ignorance. It is understood from this verse that by agitation of the element of egoism in ignorance, the first thing produced was the sound, which is the subtle form of ether. It is stated also in the Vedanta Sutra that the sound is the origin of all objects of material possession, and that by sound one can also dissolve this material existence. Anavriti Shabdat means liberation by sound. The entire material manifestation began from sound, and sound can also end material entanglement if it has a particular potency. The particular sound capable of doing this is the transcendental vibration of Hare Krishna. Our entanglement in the material affairs has begun from the material sound. Now we must purify that sound in spiritual understanding. There is sound in the spiritual world also, and if we approach that sound, then our spiritual life begins. And the other requirements for spiritual advancement can be supplied. When we have to understand very clearly that sound is the beginning of creation of all material objects for our sense gratification. Similarly, if sound is purified, our spiritual necessities also are produced from sound. Here, it is said that from sound, the ether became manifested, and that the air became manifested from ether. How the ethereal sky comes from sound, and how the air comes from sky, and how fire comes from air will be explained later on. Sound is the cause of the sky, and the sky is the cause of the Srotram, the ear. The ear is the first sense for receiving knowledge. One must give oral reception to any knowledge one wants to receive, either material or spiritual. Therefore, Srotram is very important. The Vedic knowledge is called Shruti. Knowledge has to be received by hearing. By hearing only we can have access to either material or spiritual enjoyment. In the material world, we manufacture many things of our material comfort simply by hearing. They are already there, but by just hearing, one can transform them. If we want to build a very high skyscraper, this does not mean that we have to create it. The materials for skyscraper, wood, metal, earth, etc. are already there. But we make our intimate relationship with those already created material elements by hearing how to utilize them. Modern economic advancement for creation is also a product of hearing. And similarly, one can create a favorable field of spiritual activities by hearing from the right source. Arjuna was a gross materialist in the bodily conception of life and was suffering from the bodily concept very acutely. But simply by hearing, Arjuna became a spiritualized Krishna conscious person. Hearing is very important, and that hearing is produced from the sky. By hearing only, we can make proper use of that which already exists. The principle of hearing, to properly utilize preconceived materials, is applicable to spiritual paraphernalia as well. We must hear from the proper spiritual source. Again, thank you for this opportunity. Again, if there are any mistakes in this presentation, please bear with me and please let me know at the end. I quickly prepared this in an hour, so please forgive any mistakes here. So how we have placed this discussion is we'll first start with an understanding of this verse, and then we will talk about the transcendental sound vibration. Then we'll move on to see what is our perception of this material world. And then we'll talk about material versus spiritual world and the conceptions of the material world and the Vaishnava's vision. So at the start, what I've done here is just to give a little background of this verse. I have prepared a quick flow chart here summarizing all verses from 19 to 32. 32 is today's verse. And so this should just give a little indication of where we are. I'll just take like a few minutes to do this. So Pradhana, this is verse number 19 of this chapter, 3 points. It all starts at 17, but I am starting here with the first element, which is 19. Pradhana. So here we're talking about the gross material energy here, which is the Bahiranga Shakti. So the Lord's energy can be internal, which is always manifest, okay, which is the Antaranga Shakti. Then you have the marginal energy, which is the Tatashta Shakti. And this one can be either in the influence of the internal energy or the external energy. And then you have the gross material energy, which is the Bahiranga Shakti. And this Pradhana, and this is covered in verse number 19. And this Pradhana is then agitated by the glands of the Supreme Lord, but it usually takes place in the form of time. And so in the form of time, it is agitated. And then you get Mahat Tattva, which is referred to in verse number 20, which is the undifferentiated material elements. And so undifferentiated, so this time it is not differentiated into different different universes and all these things. It is not differentiated. It stays as undifferentiated state. And that is covered in verse number 20. And from that, we get Ahankara, which here in this particular case, it refers to the false ego, not the true identity of the spirit soul. And that in turn is differentiated into 16 elements, which are the 5 karmendriyas, 5 jnanendriyas, which refers to all the ears, eyes, nose, and so on. And the Bhagavatam verse says mind, but I've just put intelligence along with it, mind, intelligence. And then you have the 5 Bhumi, Rapi, Nalo, Vayu, all those things are there here, ether, air, fire, water, and earth. But all these, this block is actually covered in several verses. And the reason why I went a little fast here is these verses have already been done in the past 12 days. So that is the reason why I'm going a little fast with these first parts of the flowchart. And then, but what we are going to do is this false ego can be in the mode of goodness, in the mode of passion, or in the mode of ignorance. So in the mode of goodness was covered in verse 27, and this was done about 5 days ago. And from that arises mind. By agitation of that arises mind. And by agitation of false ego in the mode of passion, we get intelligence. But in the verse of the Bhagavatam, senses is also included. So I just added that as well. And today's verse is the false ego in ignorance, and that is verse 32. And I have put word by word what is there in this particular verse so that we understand. So this entire gray block here is today's verse. So false ego in ignorance, okay, so that is tasmat, okay, so sorry, tamasat. Tamasa is ignorance, so false ego in mode of ignorance, that is what is referred to there. Vikurvanat, so that is getting transformed. And why is it getting transformed? By Bhagavad Virya, in fact, it is time. So by the glance of the Supreme Lord, but Kala is actually transforming it. And that is the cause of the agitation, which is pretty much there in all these steps. So this false ego in ignorance is then converted to material sound. Okay, so that is the next part of this verse here, Shabda Matra. So it is converted to material sound. So from material sound, that in turn is transformed to sky. Also, the Bhagavad Gita refers to as come, and then here this verse refers it to as Nabaha. And then this in turn is agitated, and then that is converted into sense of hearing, and the verse says that as Srotram. So this entire gray block is this verse. So Tamasat, and through what? Through Vikurvanat, and what? Who is agitating it? Bhagavad Virya, that is Kala, that is time, and that is converting to Shabda Matram, that is material sound, which in turn is transforming to sky, which in turn is transforming to sense of hearing. And the next set of verses which will come will then talk about all the other elements here, air, fire, water, ether, one by one it comes. So it is basically giving, so this is a summary of the flowchart, giving the background of all the verses from 17 all the way through this particular verse. So there is one verse that Prabhupada has cited here in the purport at the beginning of this verse. So if we see this verse here, I'm just going back to this verse. If you see here, so tamasat, okay, so that is from ignorance. What is agitating it? So vikurbanat, it is agitating. And what is doing it? Bhagavad virya, that is by the glance of the Supreme Lord in this part. And we will understand that is time, kala. Okay, so and what are we getting from this mode of ignorance aspect of the false ego? When agitated, you get shabda, which is sound. Okay, shabda matram, abhut tasman nabaha. Okay, so that is ether, sky, come, whatever it is. And then from that, when that is agitated, you get srotra. So that is the sense of hearing. So that is this verse. So all we did right now is just the translation of this verse. And Prabhupada is saying that has cited this. It's a very nice verse he has cited. It is anavriti shabdat, anavriti shabdat. That is what Prabhupada has cited in the purport here. It is actually taken literally from this Vedanta Sutra, verse 4. Chapter 4. Vedanta Sutra in turn is divided into 4 chapters. The first chapter gives the introduction. The second chapter talks about Sambandha, and then third Abhideya, and then you have Prayojana as the last. So the last chapter, which is the goal, Prayojana is the 4th chapter. There, the 4.4.22, that is where this particular thing is verse is taken from. Even though the purport is not specifying it, but that's where it is taken from. Anavriti Shabdat. So Anavritihi, Prabhupada has translated that as liberation in the purport. Basically, for us, it means in the Govinda Bhashya, which is our commentary of the Vedanta Sutra written by Sri Baladeva Vidyabhushana. There he has translated as no return from Vaikuntha, because there is like the literal translation, anavriti. So we are going there, but there is no return back from Vaikuntha. Shabdat, on account of spiritual declaration, because the Shastras are saying that once we go to Vaikuntha, there is no coming back. So Shabdat. So Govinda Bhashya, this I have taken it literally from there. So where Sri Baladeva Vidyabhushana is saying that the soul's path, okay, so it is like the path of the Deva. So those in the mode of spiritual goodness, Shuddha Sattva, it leads to the Lord. They go to the Vaikuntha. But those who walk on this path do not return back to human life. And where is that being cited from? And that is cited from, surely they do not come back. And this also corroborates with what is said in the Bhagavad Gita. This is, and he has taken this from Chandogya Upanishad, because Vedanta Sutra in turn is a summary of the different Upanishads it is summarizing there. And the Bhagavatam in turn summarizes the Vedanta Sutra. Arthoyam Brahma Sutranam. The Garuda Purana itself is corroborating that the Srimad Bhagavatam itself is a commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. And Vedanta Sutra in turn takes statements from different Upanishads. And here in the Govinda Bhashya, Sri Baladeva Vidyabhushana has taken it from Chandogya Upanishad 4.15.5 to substantiate this statement which Prabhupada is citing in this purport. So Sri Baladeva Vidyabhushana is saying that the Lord is determined not to abandon his devotees. So anyone who surrendered to the Lord will take care of them, and his devotees are equally determined to love. So it's a two-way street between the devotee and the Lord. So in this particular case, it is Prabhupada has used this particular verse mantra from the Vedanta Sutra to substantiate this verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. So, but what is repeatedly happened in this verse, what we can see in this sound is, so we see that there is a material sound, and what we have here in ISKCON is the spiritual sound, which is the transcendental sound vibration, which is the bulk of this purport. So the holy name of Krishna is transcendental and should be never considered as a material sound vibration. So this purport is talking about the material sound, which is coming in that flow chart which I had shown. But our Abhideya, what we are practicing here as a process is about the spiritual sound, which is transcendental, and it has nothing to do with this mundane world. So that means that the word Krishna is not some material word which is just spoken by some individual and we are hearing it. And Prabhupada frequently cites this by saying that when we say the word table, the actual table is different. The word water and the actual water is different. So by saying the word water, someone's thirst is not quenched in the same way. But in contrast to that, this spiritual word Krishna directly comes from the spiritual world of Vraja Gokul, and it does not belong to this material world at all, and it is independent, and it is not dependent on any circumstances in this material world. And so the form of the holy name is such that although we are uttering the holy name, so we are thinking that we are uttering the holy name from our material tongue, but the material tongue can never utter the word Krishna, because the word Krishna is entirely spiritual. And therefore, but as we progress in our spiritual life, the spiritual tongue will take over the chanting of the name Krishna, which entirely originates from the spiritual world. So the divine name of the Lord is not a product, and this one I've taken it directly from Jaiva Dharma of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, of the divine name of the Lord is not a product of the material world, and only a liberated soul can pronounce the transcendental name. So when we are chanting the holy names, it goes through several iterations of improvements, starting with Nama Aparad, and then it goes, and then maybe Nama Bhash, and then Shuddha Nama at the end. So these are taken basically from verse in Garuda Purana and Harivamsa Purana, but it's summarized in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Jaiva Dharma. So this is a verse from Padma Purana which talks about the transcendental holy name. Nama Chintamani Krishna Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha Purna Shuddho Nityamukto Bhinnatvam Nama Naminaha. So this is a very famous verse which is frequently cited to understand the transcendental sound vibration. The holy name of Krishna is a transcendental wish-fulfilling gem. Okay, that is Chintamani. The Chintamani stone is the wish-fulfilling gem. And so this holy name, so Nama, the Krishna Nama, is Chintama, Krishna Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha. It is the embodiment of consciousness and sentiments, and it is complete. And why? What does it say that? Purnaha. It is complete. Shuddho. It is ever free. It is free from all material contamination. And because the name of Krishna and Krishna himself are one and the same. So there is no difference between the name Krishna and Krishna himself. Since Krishna's name is not contaminated by any material qualities, there is no question of it being involved with Maya. So it is entirely different, staying entirely in the spiritual realm. Krishna's name is always liberated. Nitya Mukto, it is always in the liberated state. There is nothing that is conditioning and conditioning the name, and it is spiritual. Bhinnatvam nama namino. That's what is said here, that the name and Krishna himself are not different. And therefore, and in order for us to go in this path, this verse is talking about the material sound, but as the purport is going, Prabhupada moves towards the spiritual, spiritualizing the material sound. So, but the name Krishna is transcendental and should be never considered as a material vibration. But as the first step, when we are chanting the Mahamantra, usually many people, there are a lot of offenses which are committed as we, and these offenses, it is called as Nama Aparad. That is what exactly this word Aparad means, is that there is utterance of the holy name is made with enmity in the heart. It is there deep in Jayato Darpana Marjanam. So that is why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu initially says about cleansing the heart. It is there, the enmity in the heart is there deep within, and it is the lowest form of chanting, wherein one commits any of the 10 offenses against the holy name. So Jaiva Dharma, it says that if an offender, there is an example here given by Sri Bhaktivinoda Thakur, if one is an offender in the chanting the name, that person should submit to the holy name and then freed from the offenses as detailed in the Bhagavatam 7.5.23 to 24. 7.5.23-24 is a Shravanam Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam verse. But then for every offense, there is a certain way to mitigate that offense. And for each offense, that is an elaborately different lecture. So I won't go into that. But so what is an offense? So this word aparad is divided into two parts. Apa, which means against, okay, something, it is against that. Radha, which means success, prosperity, or to please, or to the flow of affection. So something that curtails the flow of affection is called aparad. Something that is, and what is curtailing it? Literally, the name Nama aparad means we are just displacing the holy name. So we are displeasing it, and the natural flow of affection to Krishna is being affected there. So, but then comes the question, if there are each offense pulls us away, and there are a lot of repercussions to each one of the 10 offenses, and the 11th offense being inattentiveness. So then why chant when there are so many problems with offensive chanting? But then Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that even in that kind of chanting, there is still a benefit. And what is that? So that is why we should not give up the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Even though there are so many repercussions to offensive chanting, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that even that offensive chanting, there is some good result in that. And what is the good result in that? That the holy name will still give whatever result the offender desires while chanting the names of Krishna. It might be some material desire, but even that, because it is unconditional and completely in the transcendental platform, it still offers that benediction. But what it will not award is the love of Krishna. So at the same time, the offender has to suffer the result of their offense against the holy name. So even though they have to suffer, but the holy name is still merciful, and it gives the so-called material desire they are having while chanting, but they do not get Krishna prema, and they have to suffer the result of the offenses to the holy name. So the offender chants the name with a wicked mentality, that is the enmity with the heart. But even though there are 10 different offenses, the basic thing is there is a wickedness. But after some time, what happens is that the person who is chanting can start chanting free from wickedness. And how does this happen? They slowly accumulate some sukriti, some pious credit. And then this pious credit increases, and then it influences and enables them to chant in the association of saintly people. So this pious credit in turn leads to some causeless mercy. And then we have here association of saintly people. And that association of saintly people in turn will help us to chant the pure name. And therefore, the prerequisite here to chant the pure name or Shuddha Nama is association with pure devotees. And therefore, the influence of the saints induces the offender to chant the holy name constantly, and eventually that frees one from Nama Aparadha. So it goes, so we practice, eventually we will we would seek sincerely the association of saintly devotees, and they in turn will help us to chant without the Nama Aparadha. This Namabhash is also there, but then it is not that it is a stage that we are aspiring to go to. It's not like that we are going from Namaparat to Namabhash to Shuddha Nama. It's not a progressive ladder like that. But the holy Namabhash, so here it just means that it appears like the holy name, but it is not. So it means it's like a clearing stage. So because it clears or purifies the heart of all sins. So it is an intermediate stage, but it is not a stage that one aspires to go, that you clear the 10 offenses and then you go to the Namabhash. Okay, so what happens here is, here one hears the holy name attentively, and there are no offenses. None of the 10 offenses are there here. However, it is still not, even though it is not perfect, it is still beneficial. What does this Namabhash means? It is coming from a result of ignorance, even though they are calling the name of God, but they are not here referring to Krishna directly, but they are not committing any offense. The classic example given here too is Ajamila. Even though he was calling his son Narayana, there was no offense committed there. And even in response to that, he had the association of devotees. And who's the association of devotees? The Vishnu Dutas. The Vishnu Dutas came, and in response to the association of devotees, that is the Vishnu Dutas, then Ajamila progressed later towards Shuddha Nama. And that in turn led him to the next stage. So the Shuddha Nama, this is my last slide here about the holy name, I think. So the definition is given in Jaiva Dharma, that the Shuddha Nama refers to the Hari Nama, the name of Krishna, that is free from the 10 kinds of offenses, And what does it mean? It means chanting the holy name with a favorable attitude. Anukulya Krishna Anushilanam Pratikulya Nivar. So all kinds, it's dovetailed to whatever is favorable towards Krishna, while remaining free from all material desires. So material desires is gone. In addition to that, it's free from covering of soft jnana, karma, or siddhi. That means it is pure bhakti, shuddha bhakti, chintamani. It's a gemstone and it is pure devotion without any contamination of jnana or karma. It is there is no mishra bhakti here. It is not mixing with knowledge or karma or anything. And because bhakti itself is standalone and the pure name arises, all the others, jnana, karma, they are all dependent on bhakti, but bhakti is not dependent on all these things. So it is standalone and it is not contaminated. In that state, the pure name arises from accepting the holy name with only favorable inclinations, that is anukulya, and rejecting all the unfavorable emotions from the heart. Then it gives the ability to chant the pure name in the act of divine grace, okay? And it requires the mercy of the Vaishnavas, Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha, Kripa Sindhubhye evacha. So, and who have saturated their minds and hearts with devotion. In that sense, one will be able to chant. And when one chants the first time the Shuddha Nama, all the karma, the prarabdha karma, beginning to end, all the karma is destroyed. And then the second time when they chant the name, the Shuddha Nama, at that time, directly the name will descend from the Vraja Gokul. So unless one is completely eradicated of all karma, then the Shuddha Nama does not enter into the heart. So this purport also talks about spiritualizing the material, anything that we speak, anything that we say, how to spiritualize it. So what is this material world? So here, this is taken from a conversation of Srila Prabhupada and a university student in Los Angeles in January of 1974. So when one dreams at night, one perceives that as being real. So this is verbatim taken from Prabhupada's conversation. So Prabhupada is saying here, yes, you think that is real. It is a dream, but you're crying. There is a tiger, tiger. Where is the tiger? But you're seeing it as a fact, a tiger. I'm being killed by a tiger, but where is the tiger? So all the things that we are perceiving in the material world is like that in the dream. It is happening in the dream. So the fact that the dream is happening is real. But is there the tiger? No. So that means that we are getting an impression of factuality, but it is a dream. Our perception of this material world is like the dream. So, but the advantage of having the human, so this is a sentence here, this is from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He's saying, but the advantage of having the human body is that even in that dream, we can realize the reality, which is God. So in that dream, there is a wake-up sound, and that is the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And it will wake us up from that dream. And that is the song, Samsara Dhava. It's saying it is, Vibhavari Sesha. So we are sleeping, and it is asking us to wake up. And in that song, we can see here, so when we wake up, so when we are sleeping, all our senses except the sound is shut. That is why we have an alarm clock, because the sound alone is active by eyesight. That is why nobody's having some kind of a light alarm, which is because the eyes are shut, all the other senses are shut. The one sense that is still awake, even in that sleep and dream, is the sound. And that is why the sound is the first thing that is coming here. When we see the verse here, the different jnanendriyas, the first jnanendriya which is coming here is the sound, is the hearing, the ear, right? So, and so what is the difference between a spiritual sound and a material sound, a spiritual thing and a material thing? So this is all these 4 points here is a summary of all these verses here I took. Bhagavad Gita 7.19, Bhagavatam 2.5.39, 2.61, 3.15.18, 8.24.52, and then Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela 2.5, Madhya Lila 8.193, and then a few other verses here. All these together, the summary of this is that there are 4 points which you can clearly understand about the spiritual world. And what is that? That the spiritual world is made of spirit. Okay. Number 2, there is no duality. Advaitam. Okay. That is the Brahma Samhita verse, Advaitam, with spiritual variegatedness, even though it is Badantita Tatvidam Tatvam Yajnanam Advayam, even though this transcendental Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavaniti, Shabdete, even though it is non-duality, but there is spiritual variegatedness. So that means that there is, if you take, like, for example, compare spirit with gold, you can still make mountains of that spirit, rivers of the spirit. So there is it's a differentiated spirit. And therefore, like, for example, the Govardhan mountain is a spiritual mountain. The Yamuna river is a spiritual river. So it is differentiated, and it is not an undifferentiated whole, as is mentioned in the Kevala Advaita of Shankaracharya. So, but and everything there is absolute and meant for the pleasure of Krishna. So all these elements there, they are working for the pleasure of Krishna in the Bhagavan feature. So Jiva Goswami says there that in the Tattva Sandarbha, that even there the gradation is there. That is, you have the Brahman, the Paramatma, the Bhagavan being the ultimate word in the 3. So even all the spiritual variegatedness is there for the pleasure of the Lord in the spiritual form of Bhagavan in the transcendental form. So, and in contrast to that, material sound or the material world is full of duality, and there is change. For example, if you see this mountain here, this will give a clear distinction between what we perceive as material world and what a spiritualist perceives this. So if you take this, so let's see if through this picture we can try to understand this. If you have a material mountain here, let's say the Rockies mountain here in the US, one side of the mountain faces the ocean. Okay, that is the Pacific Ocean. And then you get rain, and then there is a lot of growth of vegetation and so on. But the other side, there is no rain and there is desert. So the top of the mountain, there is snow. In the bottom, you don't have that. So in this way, in this mountain, a material mountain, it is full of variegatedness, full of duality. So, but in the spiritual mountain, the top of the mountain and the bottom of the mountain is all identical. There is no duality there. So that it's like a basic analogy here. So in the top, you have the Govardhan mountain, and in the bottom, you have the material mountain. In the same way, we have the spiritual sound and the material sound. And here, Prabhupada is talking about transforming the material sound to the spiritual sound. So this is the famous verse, Bhagavatam 1.1.1, which says that the manifested internal potency is real. Okay, this is the Antaranga Shakti, whereas the external manifested energy in the form of material existence is temporary and illusory. So what does this mean? This means that if you take this, if you take this desert here, you see that there is a mirage. Okay, so there is, somebody sees that there is some water here, but is there water? There is not. But is there an illusion? Yes. That is the difference between the Vaishnavas and those who are following Mayavada. So in Mayavada, neither is there this water, but the illusion itself doesn't exist. They have to, because if there is an illusion, then there is duality. There is Brahman and there is illusion, and there is two. So that means that they have to get rid of the illusion itself. But we, the Vaishnavas, they're saying, but even though the fact that all this is in the dream, but the illusion does exist. So Bhagavad Gita says, Maya Dakshena Prakriti Suyate Characharam, that it is that this material energy is working under Krishna's direction. Therefore, we have various conceptions about material sound. Okay, so conceptions of the material sound, it can be good, bad, imaginations. But when one forgets that that person is an eternal servant of Krishna, and one wants to enjoy the material world through different plans. At that time, one distinguishes between a material good sound, a bad sound, and so on. But the Vaishnava sees everything in relation to Krishna. And even in this material world, by such advanced knowledge, everything becomes spiritualized. That is the last part of this purport. In other words, everything in the material world is already spiritual. It is just that there is this I took from a lecture by His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj. What he's saying there is that our perception, the conditioned soul's perception of this material world is not real. But the spiritual person is able to see this world as it is. This world is already spiritual. It is just that the conditioned soul is not able to see it. But the liberated soul is able to see this world as it is in relation to Krishna. So the Vaishnava's vision is that the Vaishnava sees everything in relationship to Krishna, even in this material world. By such advanced knowledge, everything becomes spiritualized. In other words, everything in this material world is already spiritual, but due to our lack of knowledge, we see things as material. So this I've taken it, all these 4 sentences are literally taken from Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead book, and chapter number 87. There, this 4 things are there, how to convert material sound to spiritual. So I just verbatim took from that and copy pasted it here. So in the material world, we have all these 3 different kinds of sufferings. We have Adhyatmika, Adibhautik, Adidevik, all the 3 different kinds of sufferings. But our goal here is to spiritualize it. So in the ultimate sense, this is my last but one slide. We're already nearing the end of the class. So when we see Krishna in the Bhagavan feature, there is a transcendent aspect and there is a immanent aspect. The transcendent aspect is in the Bhagavan feature, Andhantarastam, Paramanu, Chayantarastam. So if you see this verse from Brahma Samhita, it talks about Andhantarastam. So here it talks about the Bhagavan feature, but the very next part, it talks about the immanent feature, which is Paramatma, Paramanu, Chayantarastam. So I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord. So even though when we are trying to spiritualize our material dealings here, we are worshipping Krishna in the transcendental form as Bhagavan, and everything is dovetailed to Krishna in the transcendental form. And this transcendental form, and what is this transcendental form? He is there uncontaminated entirely in the spiritual world. Krishna does not touch any aspect of this material world. And even for creation of this material world, he expands as Mahavishnu, who comes and lies as Karano, Daka, Shai means lying down, Karana in the causal ocean, in the Viraja Nadi, he's coming and lying down. Even there, Krishna does not come and touch the material world. And therefore, Krishna in the Bhagavan, in the transcendental features, entirely in the Goloka Vraja, which is said in the Goloka Eva Nivasati Akila Atma Bhuto. So that is the last word in the 3 steps of spiritual realization of Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Some are stopping at the level of Brahman, some at the Paramatma, and the Paramatma is where Krishna is immanent. That is the next part of the same Brahma Samhita verse, Paramanu Chayantarastam. Ishwara, and where is that corroborated with? Ishwara Sarva Bhutanam Hriddeshe Arjuna Tishtari. So that means that Krishna is there as a super soul in everybody's heart. Every verse in the Vedas, you will always find corroborations elsewhere. So that is the corroboration in Bhagavad Gita. So the summary of today's verse and the purport is that it first starts with false ego and ignorance, and from there, by agitation with time, you get material sound, and from there you get sky, which is skam, and this verse it is nabha, and then sense of hearing, which is the jnanendriya. Okay, so and then the purport then takes us to spiritualizing it. And so Prabhupada talks about material elements like wood, metal, earth, and so on, and how everything in relationship to Krishna can be spiritualized. And Arjuna becomes, so this is spiritualizing spiritualizing everything that we see, and by hearing only, we can make proper use of that which already exists. So with that, if I created this very fast today, so if I have any mistakes, anything I said fast, please forgive me and please correct me now. I offer my humble obeisances to here. Vanchakalpadrubhyascha kripasindhu behavicha padana pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Thank you again for this opportunity. Hare Krishna. Any mistakes? Anything, Prabhu? It was so fast. So.
No, actually, I have one question. So, yeah, I really like the last thing you mentioned, that how this material world is only spiritual, but then only the real liberated soul can see the world as it is. So, so that's referring to a stage of realization. So, how to get closer and closer to that reality?
So I think the point of discussion here is how are we spiritualizing and dovetailing things in Krishna, and that in slowly we will be able to see everything in relation to Krishna. So for example, when we see in a temple, it is a little easier. And here we have our deities, and that is a great step for us in our senses, which are used to seeing everything material. The Lord is merciful, and here we have a clear process. We have the deity. They may be made of stone, wood, marble, whatever. So, but there itself, we are learning this process of spiritualizing it from matter to spirit. So it's a step-by-step process. And here the deity worship is a very important process in that. And we can do that in so many steps, the process, like in terms of food. When we see the food, again, we are offering it to the Lord. Initially, it will look to us. So is the Lord able to accept material food? No. Why? Because the Lord is all spirit. So he has spiritual food through any of his senses. All his senses are interchangeable. By his sight, he's able to accept spiritual food. But for us, in the initial stages, it looks like material food. But then as time progresses in association with devotees, we're able to spiritualize one by one. And the Lord who helps us to do that is Sri Radha Govinda, who is the Lord for Abhidaya, for this practice. And slowly, this practice, all the anartha nivriti happens, and then all the cloud, everything, the heart gets cleansed, and then it moves forward. So initially, but the process is so well established here by the mercy of Prabhupada and all his disciples and the great devotees in here. We have had the opportunity to hear. The process is so well established, and when we follow the process properly and sincerely, then it leads us to this process of eventually being able to see the world as it is. So anyway, it's a short thing, but you can add anything if I've missed it, I think. This is briefly a set. So
yeah, I like that point. If you don't see something in relation with Krishna, then it's not real. So
it is not something that comes artificially, but eventually it will come. It will come naturally. Initially, it might look artificial that we are trying, but it is some practice is required there. Some practice, because the love for Krishna is there dormant, but it is sleeping. We are doing so many activities. But when we are evoking it by some practice, eventually we will be able to do it naturally. Actually, only the things that we're doing in the material world is artificial. This is what is natural, but the conditioned soul is just not able to see it. So.
I also like that point that aparad means basically we have some kind of envy towards the Lord, and that's what is being expressed. I mean, a very, very subtle way, in the form of chanting inattentively. And I like that point. Unless one is completely saturated with devotion, one cannot chant a pure name. And it's very, very encouraging that you chant one pure name. Then all the paradu karmas, all the karma destroyed, the next name you can actually achieve love about it.
Hmm.
So I mean, it's very good for me. Not chanted one Q&A.
Thank you. Very, very nice.
Please let me. I can chant one Q&A at least.
Great. Please, have you any other concerns, mistakes, anything that I should improve on here in this? Yes.
With one clarification,
Mhm.
when we say that we cannot, Lord is spiritual in nature and we cannot see the Lord from our eyes. Similarly, it's material tongue, chanting the name because it's again spiritual. Could you clarify how does that happen?
So since you said two things there, Prabhu, one is the materialize. So that is, I'll just cite this from a conversation with Prabhupada. Prabhupada used this thing here. He said, pluck the material eyes out and then put the spiritual eyes in. This is exactly the words he used. Put the spiritual eyes in, then you'll be able to see Krishna. Because our material eyes, because Krishna is all spiritual, material eyes is not something that is. And with respect to the sound, can you just repeat the last part of what you said?
Because it is again
material tongue. Okay. So this is, again, there is this very nice book written by His Holiness Mahanidhi Swami on the art of chanting. And the second page of the book gives the answer to whatever you said, Prabhu, right now. And it talks about, I'm just literally stating from there, that the material tongue can never chant the Mahamantra. So we are chanting it, we are thinking it is spiritual, but the material tongue cannot chant. But eventually, the spiritual body, the spiritual tongue will take over the chanting, because the name Krishna does not belong to anything material. It is entirely coming from Vrajagokul, entirely coming from Vaikunta. And therefore, the spiritual tongue will take over, and that is able to relish, and that is able to, and this one I've just taken it directly from the book. I'm not saying anything on my own. And so it should just be not compared with saying any other thing. Like one could say, I think Prabhupada also mentioned this, like when said Coca-Cola or something, but it is not that. That is spoken by our conditioned body, our material body, it is spoken. But the name Krishna is independent of all this material status. It is not dependent on the material tongue. It is not dependent on anything material. And there is no any material qualification. It is not dependent on. It is independent and can be pursued entirely in an independent way. So by the spiritual body interacts with Krishna. Is that okay, Prabhu?
Yes.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Good, Prabhu. Thank you. Again, I offer my humble obeisances. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you very much, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.